I am so proud, dear audience, to present our guest today. She's an amazing woman with such laughter, with such wisdom, with such witty, hard insights. And she is in an age where most of us think, forget it, our life is pretty much done. But she proves it is so wrong. She, on November 2nd, she just told that she's getting 78 years young. And she is, how can I describe it? Full of productivity, full of power and creativity, and so grounded with her feet in the modern world. So hello and warm welcome, dear audience. Oh, I forgot. She's also, which is very important for one of the part of the interviews, she is the former partner of the Godfather author, Mario Puzo. So now finally, hello and warm welcome, dear audience, to New Generation Women, and I'm Janine van Zenos. Hello and warm welcome to Palma, to Mallorca, to Debbie Cook, first-time co-host. I call her the editor angel of New Generation Women. And hello and warm welcome finally to Texas. Hello, Carol Gino.
Hi, Janine. How are you? Hi, Deb.
Hi, Carol.
Yes, we had such a laughter. I said we have to record because we would have talked the whole hour through and the time would have been done and then we would have no entry. It was so funny. Sorry, I have to share that because you're sitting in the kitchen and we were thinking, are you going to be in the library or in the kitchen? And I said, now the oven, everybody can see it because everybody wants to be Carol's new husband. And she said, I have to hide the oven. So I'm sitting in front of it. So dear audience, when you see me doing this, then I say, Carol, just move the oven. You're feminist. Yeah. Okay, Carol, what are the three cornerstones? The three cornerstones in your life that make you the woman you are today on November 2nd, 78 years old?
What are the cornerstones? I would say, on a personal level, the people I love and those people who love me. That's one. The center point is probably my life purpose, what I feel I have to offer life, so that life will be a little bit better for having had me in it. And the third part probably is the context that I live in, which is so much bigger than what all of us see. And that keeps me balanced and happy and excited when everything in the world looks like it's going wrong. Then I look at the timeline of our planet, our species, our soul, ourselves, and I get a different perspective. And whenever I think that things are really, really going down, America right now looks to me like it's in big trouble, but I always have to remember that we wouldn't have Christianity if we didn't have Judas, not only Jesus. So sometimes we need somebody in it who looks like they're a common enemy so that it brings the shadow up and we can look at who we are and who's around us. And once something is conscious, it loses much of its power. And then we have something to focus and direct.
So then we see the light. It was so funny the way how I got to know you. I mean, it's completely ridiculously funny. I told it or shared it with Debbie, who was going to ask you also in a second what she felt when she did research about your background. So I had none research. I didn't know anything about you. We both booked an online course for women globally. And in that course, a community was offered to us. So we were supposed to introduce ourselves. And I don't know why I didn't even read your lines. I just somehow felt this power. And I asked you for an interview and you immediately said yes. So then we had a call and I was, really distracted with all the stuff, what's going on in my life and the projects I need to complete. So I had absolutely no clue who you were. And then you were always mumbling something of Mario. And I thought, who's Mario actually? And it was so funny because I had absolutely no clue who you are and about Maria Puzo and all the background. And then in the end, I felt like, hey, I just love you. It was so American, you know, the way how Americans sometimes just kick in and say, I just love you, and I didn't know you. And I thought, what a great woman. And it's going to be great. And then I read your background. And then I read about the Godfather author and your partner, Maria Puzo. And I thought, what were you thinking, Janine? Why didn't you prepare? So,
well, this is lovely. This is lovely, though, because I was me before Mario, and I am me after Mario.
Yes.
Maybe better me, but I'm still me. And I love that when we met, I was just me.
yes, you were totally you. And I had no, you know, you weren't the best-selling author, by the way, your audience of Los Angeles Times and New York Times. So there's so much that Carol has done and achieved. And I just felt the power. I felt you were so engaged. You know, you're 78 years young and you felt like the most powerful, engaged, active member of the community. So that struck me. And I found this amazingly inspiring. I think America's really good in supporting age. In Europe, and Debbie, you might agree, we are so bad in that. So, you know, you're really, after a while, you think about pension, and then people think when they work, so then I get my pension, and then life gets a little bit more stuck, or, you know, you go to restaurants and enjoy your life, but it's not about following dreams at that age anymore. Debbie, what did you, I spontaneously decided to take Debbie on board because she was so touched when she was talking about you and after her research, and give me a little briefing, prepare. And I said, why don't you want to hop? Yes, well, really sweet. And it felt almost like you guys are soul sisters. And I said, why don't you want to hop and be a co-host? And I thought, she never is going to say yes. And she did. Like, it took her a few minutes. And she said, I was shocked. And then she said, no, it's like having a chat with girlfriends. And I thought, exactly, that's how it is. Debbie, what touched you so much when you were reading and researching about Carol?
There were so many things, Carol. Your passion for life just jumps out, and that was, you know, from seeing interviews and videos that you've posted, as well as things that you've written. But the other thing that I really admire so much, because, you know, we're all on a journey, and, you know, we're all different, but there's something about you that sort of expresses so many things that I think I've heard, I've read, but you sort of encompass all of it as a living, breathing human being, which is sort of quite amazing in a way. But one of the things is you're very direct. You don't hold back. You speak your truth. And that's what everybody should do. You know, we should honor ourselves and be honest. But I just wanted to know, do you ever have any fear about that? Do you ever sort of have apprehension and doubt? Because it does make you very vulnerable, being that authentic. You know, although it's very, I don't know.
Debbie, I think the one great, marvelous advantage of being older, I love that older, that what it does is it makes you understand that we're a diverse species. We each see things differently. We perceive things differently. We have different gifts. And if two of us are looking out a window and I asked you, hey, Debbie, what two things do you see? And you tell me. And then I say, and these are the two things I see. We look out the window, and from now on, both of us see four things. We never can only see two again. So that as I got older, I understood that people weren't coming at me because they didn't like me, or whether they did or not didn't much matter. It seemed to me I could see who they were more than I believed that they could see who I was. Because if somebody accused me of being a tall blonde, I would know they were not right. So the moment I took the time to really know myself, and I don't mean only the good, kind, you know, sweetie part, I mean, before I met Mario, I was married twice. I can tell you, I am good at a lot of things. I am so good at a lot of things. I am so bad at being a traditional wife. And I love to cook. I love to serve people. I find it hard to follow a lead that isn't as good as I am sometimes, or as adept in any particular area. I can't listen. I fight. I keep being me. And then a man thinks I'm not liking him when it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with, I can't go over that edge of that cliff. I can't follow you there. And most of the men that I knew, well, they were really good men. But I have a penchant to be myself. Like you said, Debbie, I think, well, I grew up with a father who was an immigrant from Sardinia. He started reading me the Harvard classics when I was 4 years old. When I was 9 years old, I won some contest by somebody who said, "Who's the wisest man you know?" And I took it straight from Socrates and Plato's. The wisest man I know is the man who knows enough to know that he knows nothing. And they gave me an award for that. Just quoting my father. So my father.
Okay, let me just stop you. That is so great. I have to really memorize this. I have to, because I'm the same like you with leading. I'm very hard in salsa. They would say tell me at one time, you would be such a great salsa dancer if you would just learn to follow. Now I have to lead in business. And I know that also with businesses, they just always say, just Janine, behave. Can you just, yes, you can be honest, but just sometimes can you just shut your mouth? I said, nah, I cannot help it. I have to say the truth. So you were awarded for a great man. Just say it again.
Okay. The question on the essay when I was 9 years old.
Yes.
Who is the wisest man you know? And I said, the wisest man I know is the man who knows enough to know he knows nothing.
How awesome. And you did say this was 9?
My father read me Plato and Socrates from the time I was 4. So he had said that at one point. And I thought, oh, that's a good answer. Okay. I
will really remember that. I love that statement. This is going to be the statement for every kind of manager training I'm going to start. And I say, I got it from Gino. Sorry, Debbie.
Yeah, it's also very grounding and it's very humbling, isn't it? Because nobody can know everything, and it's a sort of egoless kind of statement as well, isn't it?
One of the greatest things that I came up with when I was following, I was brought up a Catholic, Roman Catholic, and I remember hearing them talk about possession and thinking to myself, why would a God I like let a devil possess a little kid? I find that really hard to believe. And I would say that to the nun and the priest, and they would say, please step outside for a moment. And then there was a long, I love the mythology that comes with religion. Because I think all of us should have a storied life. Because a civilization that's lost its stories is done for. There is no civilization. Yes. You need stories. So for a while, I wanted to be Jesus. It never occurred to me that he was a guy and I was a girl. That was nonsense. Never wanted to be Mary, wanted to be Jesus. Okay, then after a while, when I realized, okay, you're a girl, you can't be Jesus. Not any other reason, just that I was a girl. Then I wanted to discuss the Torah or the Talmud. I wanted to be Jewish. I didn't want to be Italian. I wanted to be Jewish. And it never occurred to me that I should have been a guy to do that. So I had a father who discussed things with me constantly. And I think that if all young girls or all boys and girls were brought up with the same kind of upbringing, once they reached puberty, then they could own. I got older, and then I understood the strengths of womanhood. But my foundation was you can do anything if you want to badly enough. By the way, that's not necessarily true. But
no, but believing that from being a child,
Yes.
is a really empowering
Yes.
concept.
Yeah. And from my father, my father would say, you can do anything you want to if you want to badly enough. And my mother would say, if you're so smart, why aren't you happy? Go out and play.
Really? Well, that's a great foundation.
Yeah, what a nice balance.
Yeah, it's very nice. That's amazing. I mean, that's very fortunate. Let me just ask you one question when coming to Mario, because we have mentioned him now a couple of times. And of course, he was well known and he is a character. He was a character, a big personality. So then you had 2 marriages and you said, marriage is not for me. I'm not the rule follower. That's why we were hiding the oven, that no man is now sidetracked and think he can catch you, you know, in a kitchen and thinks all his conditioned things about women. So then you came together with Mario. How open was he, or was it a struggle or a growing together to let you be the strong woman and also take the lead? Or was he very happy that you were that strong personality?
By that time, I met him when I was taking care of his wife when she was dying of cancer. And the family was wonderful. And I admired him because of who he was for her and for his kids. And I used to say to him, I will sit with her, get some sleep, go into another room and sleep, and I'll wake you up if anything happens. And he said to me, I can't do that. And I say, why? And he'd say, because if she reaches over for my hand and it's not there, she'll be frightened. So the whole time we were together, it was Erica, Mario, and me. Well, just before she was dying, I was with her one night, and I said, is there anything that makes you really sad thinking about dying? And she said, there's no one to watch my family, she says, and my kids growing up, and even my husband, we've been together for 35 years. I worry about them. And I said, okay, I'll keep an eye out for you. You know, I'll keep an eye out on you. And that was I would say my purpose from the beginning of my life. Always felt like it was to help to heal. I sometimes have a big mouth to do it, and like you asked, it is sometimes when I hear what I say, I think, oh my Lord, I don't believe I just said that. But it seems the world can weather me, you know, and it gives me the opportunity to acknowledge and recognize authenticity in others. And Mario was truly, truly an authentic being. He really was. And so when he met me, the greatest passion of his life had just died. We had been in a foxhole together for 3 months. And like when I said to him at one time, we used to be able to talk about Erica. So we were buddies then first. And then I always knew that I wanted to write because I couldn't help my patients enough one at a time because there were too many of them. So therefore, I said to him, why don't you teach me how to write? And he said, I wouldn't want anybody I love to be a writer. It's too tough a job. I said, but I've been a nurse. I mean, I have to look at death all the time. I have to understand that sometimes death is a promise, not a threat. I said, somebody criticizing me for my writing, that's not like somebody I love dying right in front of me because I didn't know how to help them or because it wasn't in my purview. It wasn't my job. That's God's job. He gives breath, he takes it away. You know, what I can do is just be myself and hope that that's enough for them when I'm there because I'm not afraid. And that's how it always worked. And so, I don't know, we just got to know each other and I admired him terribly as a person. And then he explained to me, he taught me about power in the outside world, which is how men accrue power. But he so admired inner power of the feminine aspects. And he had a very well-developed feminist aspect because his mother brought him up. And he had lots of brothers and sisters, and he had a very strong mother. Like he said to me one time, he said, do you want to hear the good news or the bad news first? And I said, tell me the bad news first. He said, No, I'm going to tell you the good news first. I said, what? He said, you remind me of my mother and my sister. And I said, all right, now tell me the bad news. He said, you remind me of
my mother and my sister.
Could I add something there? Because something I read in your last book, Me and Mario, was that you said that women should treat men like they treat other women, and then they would respect them more. And that's because, you know, if women are manipulating men, then they miss the chance to see what men are really actually capable of. And there was another beautiful thing that really resonated with me and touched me when you described you'd had a really, really bad day, and it had been a sort of catalogue of things that were going in a ever downward spiral, and you felt really deflated and low, and you just needed to see him and just wanted him to hold you. And he said he would never let you, I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact words, but it was,
he said, I'll never let you go down in defeat.
In defeat. And what I thought was also so lovely about that, because you went on to describe, because you felt so vulnerable and you trusted him and you respected him, you were able to sort of not be the strong woman for a while, and trust him enough to let him hold space for you and physically hold you. And I thought that's so exceptional. And, you know, that really had a big impact on me, because especially in these days when there's so much disharmony between men and women and so many unsatisfactory relationships, you know, how do you see that could be improved so there was, you know, a solution to all the conflict that exists in the workplace, you know, in relationships, because it's in society, isn't it? It's a sort of almost an epidemic.
It is. And Debbie, I think that was one of the reasons why I waited so long to write that book, because I realized that women thought that taking a man's hero's journey was the way to attain power. But Mario helped me see that they were completely different kinds of power. And one of the best women's books I ever read was his book called The Fortunate Pilgrim, which is as close to an autobiography as you could get, about his mom bringing them over. But how we did it is, we had conflicts. That's why we decided not to get married. Like he said to me, I promise you I'll marry you when I'm ready to get rid of you. And I said, oh, that sounds like fancy footwork. And he said, you leave your husbands. I said, well, no, I only leave them if I can't live with them. So he said to me, do you want my name? And I said, no. And he said, do you want to leave? Do you want to be in my house? And he said, and cook my meals and serve my friends when they come over for card games and stuff? And I said, no, why would I want to do that? And he said, do you want to fix my bed and clean my house? And I said, no, I want it to stay just like it is. And he said, okay, he says, now I'm going to ask you a question, because he says, I know you're a girl who really believes in fairness and justice. And I said, what's that? He said, if it goes like that, what's in it for me? And I said, oh, yeah, that's a point. Because he said to me, think about it, Carol. Now my kids take responsibility for me. They help me with the house. They help me do all the things that a wife would help me do. But if I had a wife, I would no longer be their responsibility. He said, therefore, it would be just me. Oh, I said, no, that's awful. No, we can't do that.
But there's a truth, you know, there's a wonderful truth around that, because I remember that when my ex-husband and I got married, our mentor would say, just be aware that you don't buy into the relationship matrix or the marriage matrix. And that is very true. First of all, it felt really good to be married. It felt different. It felt more close, more committed. And looking back, I could see how we were trapping into the expectations that society gives you and tells you, now you're a married couple. And we would, of course, fall right into that. And just by looking back, And now I'm not married, I'm with a partner. And all the things that I wished for, I thought that I'm going to have with a new partner, I don't have. I mean, he's completely the opposite. And of course, that caused a lot of ego stuff within me, layer by layer. And then after a while, all the layers would just dribble away and it wouldn't be important anymore. And then I thought, well, maybe I changed. Maybe I'm not romantic anymore. Maybe something got wrong with me. But I don't think it got wrong. Just all the conditions fell apart. And that was actually very liberating and very true. Now, what would you you promote Mario and me, or me and Mario, very strongly for the love that you had, and also for the authenticity. And what is the greatest lesson that you learned from him, and vice versa, that he learned from you?
I think he learned from me, because he said that oftentimes, that he learned more about life and death from me, and not to be afraid as much. And he learned he could trust people. Okay? What I learned from him is, God, there's so much, and it's so much that seems like such a little thing, little ways. I learned how to be myself. Mm-hmm. Mario allowed me to be myself, and he was tickled by it. He couldn't do it. He couldn't be as extemporaneous as I. He was a shyer person. But he would clap for me because of who I was. And and then if I said to him, why are you doing that? You promised me something. And he'd say, I promised it? And I'd say, yes. And he said, wow, I must have felt like that when I promised it. He said, stop paying so much attention to words and start looking at people's actions. Mm-hmm. He said, then you'll know who people are. Yeah. And he said, that's so true. Yeah. He said, and it was really funny because we were able to be really honest with each other, you know? It was like, I mean, this sounds like a silly thing and stuff like that, but like the first time we slept together. I mean, he said to me, did you sleep with me because you felt bad for me because my wife died? And I said, I guess a little bit.
You did say that?
Yeah, I said, I guess a little bit. I said, and he said to me, he said, thank you very much. And so I said, okay. I said, but you know what it was? It was like, I really promised Erica. And so he said, oh, I'm sure she'd love the way you keep an eye on me. And we both laughed because we could see the truth of both. Yes. So he didn't make fun of me because making a vow like I'll keep an eye on your husband. And I had just read an article about how when people are married for more than 35 years, the remaining partner lasts only 11 months. They only collect 11 Social Security payments after one dies. And I thought, oh, damn, I can't let him die. I said, so he'll have to fall in love again. That's the only thing. Is I'm doing it for Erica. And Mario would say, honey, maybe you and I are the only two people who will understand this. But there was a truth in it. And the truth in part of why I wrote that book is not only for women, but young men have such a hard time now knowing how to be strong and when to be vulnerable. And Mario knew how to stand his ground without pushing anybody else over. He knew how to say how he felt without making anybody else to blame or feeling less than. And when I could see that he could be as strong as he could be, and yet I could be as strong as I could be, and that it was a break for both of us, because I love a good lead. And if in his strength, where he was strong, I loved to play number two. But where he wasn't strong, he loved to have me play number one and lead, because then he could relax.
What and like you said, Carol, what is a strong lead? You say you love a strong lead.
Like a strong leader.
Yeah, yes. How do you define? How do you define?
How would I define it? Someone who, first of all, has some knowledge of the situation, has some skill with the situation and who doesn't have fear around the situation, or who has been willing to walk through it. So that if Mario was nervous about like choosing a hotel room, okay, because he wasn't sure I'd like it, or because something that affected Mario was color. He loved pastels. I mean, the author of The Godfather, the big killer, you know? And he used to say to me, that's not the man I am, that's the man I want to be. I got The Godfather, you know? So when we'd go to a hotel, he'd sit in the lobby with a book and he'd read, and he'd say, okay, follow the concierge up to the hotel, get us the room, and call me if you like it. And I'd say, well, I'd like to share the decision. And he'd say, no, you wouldn't. He said, because if we go up to a room and you don't like it, it doesn't matter if I like it, we're not staying. He said, so why should I go up, unpack, pack again, and go down? You go up with the concierge, he says, and look at the room. If you like it, I promise I'll stay. I said, okay. So I went up. Wait till you hear how funny this is. I went up. I saw the hotel. I couldn't stand this room. It was the best hotel in Rome, had the best room, but it looked like the Addams family should live there. It had satin, dark blue satin, and taffeta and velvet all over the walls and everything. And I said, oh God, he's going to hate it. It's the dark blue. So I told the concierge, and he said, we have no other room. So I went downstairs and I said to Mario, it's dark blue, you're going to hate it. And he said, but the concierge says, but we have no other room. So all of us walked upstairs again to this room, and I'm looking around. I said, you see what I mean? And Mario says, mm-hmm. He says, let me talk to the concierge. So I walk over to the concierge. I walk away. He goes over to the concierge, and I watch him get in his pocket, and he's pulling money out and giving it to this guy. And suddenly he says to the concierge is nodding, and suddenly Mario looks at him and he says, what can I do? Madame, she doesn't like it, she won't stay. Then I see more money. And then what happens is Mario comes over to me and he says, we're staying. I said, we're staying? I thought you'd hate this. He said, I know, but what the concierge said is, you know, this is the best restaurant in Rome, and there is like a 3-month waiting list to get a reservation here. But he told me that for every night we stayed here, he would get me a table with the best pasta I ever tasted. I said, so you're telling me you traded me for a bowl of pasta? And he said, yes, my dear, but there are some things we have to understand in priorities. So that's where we stayed.
He was not just, and I know that Debbie has wonderful questions for being a woman leader, because she said that was very inspiring what you said for women who are women leaders, and our audience there are 40 plus women and also women leaders. But I want one question before I give over to have that Debbie asked. There was an amazing little episode you shared in a video on Facebook and on YouTube, and was talking about the writing, what you learned from Mario on writing. And he said, I'm going to write. And he was sitting, you know, getting up in the morning and sitting on the couch and staring at the ceiling, and then reading a book. And you said, I thought you were writing. And he said, I do. And you said, well, I don't hear anything. You must have shouted somewhere from, you know, another room. And he said, well, you mean typing? And you said, yes. I said, no, the book is writing itself first before I'm going to type it. It was something like this.
Yes.
And I think this is so inner directed also, because normally, you know, we forgot all about intuition, and women slowly came back, and we made ratio and the whole intellect our Bible for a while. And that didn't take us very far. So I love that story. Someone who has never done information, maybe doesn't have any angels, maybe doesn't have any esoterical stuff that he was reading or listening to, was just really very much into his own power and feeling guided by characters, feeling guided that the book is going to, you know, write itself before I start typing, which today we would learn in online classes, but he just did it intuitively by himself. And I found this very strong. So there must also, with this outer directedness and leadership strength, there must also have been a very strong intuitive leadership.
Oh, very, very strong. Yes, it was very strong. I mean, like he said, if it wasn't for, he'd call it his luck. I asked him one time, I said to him, "You're trying to tell me that you don't believe in angels?" And he says, "Yeah, I'm afraid I don't believe in angels." And I said, "Why? Because you can't see them?" And he said, "Well, that's one thing." And I said, "You've never seen it?" I said, "Do you remember being born?" And he said, "No." And I said, "But you're here." I said, "The fact that you don't remember." And he said, "I can't believe that such a smart girl as you believes all that crazy stuff." And I said, "I can't believe a smart man like you doesn't." I said, "Because," I said, "if I die and I'm like you and I'm just unplugged like a computer or something, I'll never know it." I said, "And my whole life has been easier because I know there are angels and everything around. If you die, you've made your life hard. And when you're dead, you're going to find out how easy all of this could have been." I said, "So that doesn't sound so smart to me." So he says, "What does puzzle me, though, is how does a girl who thinks like you become the most confident woman I know? Or confident man, for that matter." And I said to him, "I don't know. It just happened. It's part of my gifts, like my angels." I said, "But the thing you have to remember is that everything that's in this world is not seen. Love that you feel isn't seen."
Yes.
You
What I
know?
do like so much about the relationship, and that's also part of female leadership, is the generosity that both of you have. This amazing way of being generous and allowing. And I think when it comes to female leadership, lots of women got very smart. They deny that there is very often some kind of intuition because that was not very accepted in the male system. But they're also hardened up. So the allowing aspect, the generous aspect, is still very much more seen in the male world. Now female leaders are picking up on that. And I remember that Debbie was also, very attracted. And she said, this is exactly because I always said to her, our leaders, or not our leaders, our audience are 40 plus women and female leaders. And Debbie said to me, and you might want to repeat it, how much you thought that this is also such a wonderful teaching for female leaders, the way how Carol is leading her world and her perspective.
Well, I mean, what struck me again, Carol, was that you have vision and you have authority with the way you speak, but you have never lost touch with humanity. And I don't know if this is because of, you said you had a calling from a young age where you wanted to make some impact, you wanted to make a difference. And certainly nobody goes into nursing for the glamour. And, it is because you deeply care and you have a vocation to do that. But it seems to me that lots of women in leadership roles often lose touch with their feminine energy, and not their femininity necessarily, but their feminine energy and their compassion, and become quite close to a lot of heart in trying to model themselves on the male leaders that there are.
Right.
And how would you see that maybe women could mobilize others, men and women, and strive for equality for both? Because I know this is something that you've always...
He used to make me laugh. He'd say, "Why would women ever want to be equal when they're already better?" He said, "They can engage their brain whenever they want. But if you don't have inner wisdom, if you don't know yourself," he said, "think of the things women have to do every day. They have kids, they have a husband, they have a house, they have a million jobs. A man has to go to work and come home. That's all he has to do." Now, he says, once you change those roles, remember, he says, let's work with what we've got. He says, I'm an old Italian. I've done that. Whether I grow out of it or not, I can't change my whole family organization because I brought them up one way. Now I know you, and I can see the injustice of a lot of what went on. But he said, and so now I'm different. But he said, you had to train me to be different. He said, women have to train men to be fathers, to be partners. He said, because men don't know they're connected to the universe except through women. Women know that they're connected through having children or through their ability to have children, whether they choose to or not. They always have the potential of being connected to life and another human being. So they're connected to all. Men don't know that. He said, not basically. They have to connect first. So he was very, very good about pointing out power. And so at one point I said to him, hey, don't talk to me like that. You just said we were going someplace without giving me a choice. And I said, would you have done that with your men friends? I said, if you wouldn't say something to your best friend who's a guy, don't say it to me. I said, that's an easy rule. I said, because that immediately gets rid of the condescension.
Did you feel, Debbie said this also, we are losing, and I was one of the generations, I was in a male system, and I mostly was, negotiating just with men. And that didn't occur to me until I was divorced. And then I also talked with other women, and then being, alone by myself and self-employed, and then the male system. I really had to struggle with that sometimes. And men would say, we are afraid of beautiful and strong women. And I felt a mess inside, but I felt really wounded. I sometimes felt almost I have to make myself smaller. If I don't make myself smaller, and that went more unconsciously, I'm not going to find any man anymore because they cannot cope with that. Did you ever struggle? Did you ever question that? Did you ever felt like you're making yourself smaller, or you have to, or did you never had that kind of struggle?
No, I did, but only when I got married the second time. I was married the first time, and I had 2 kids, so a single mom and stuff like that. And my grandmother, on my mother's side, was, she was a midwife and went to Bellevue Hospital training and studied overseas in France. And she drove a car, carried a gun, did abortions when necessary. And she was the woman whose house we lived in till I was 7. And I remember my father from the time I was little, and my father's mother left 3 of her children over in Sardinia and brought 3 of them over here when she was young too. And she died when she was 48, and my other grandmother died when she was 52. So my father used to say to me all the time, remember, you come from a long line of pioneer women. Be worthy of that.
Wow. I think
what
you
a
were
legacy.
very lucky. Yes,
Yeah.
isn't that? I never had that, and my father died very early, so I never had that male presence. I don't know how it was with you, Debbie, but I never had that foundation in my parenthood.
My father was very traditional, and he was very loving and caring and supported all of us, but he couldn't handle powerful women, and I was always quite headstrong, my mother as well, so there was quite a lot of conflict there. There was a big generation gap, and
well, my father used to say things like this, if my mother would holler at my father for being too tough on me or something like that, my father would turn to me and I'd say, why, Daddy, why are you doing this? Why are you acting like this? And he says, baby, he used to call me Buddy most of the time. When he was soft, he called me baby. So he said to me, Buddy, he says, if somebody gives you a thoroughbred horse, and it's a thoroughbred horse, he said, and that horse never wins a race, he says, is it because of the horse or because of the trainer? And I used to say, Dad, I'm a little kid, I'm not a horse. That held very little. That held. And when we fought, like you, Debbie, I was very headstrong. And when my father would say something, he didn't ever, I've only heard my father raise his voice twice in my life. He just put his tongue to the side and go, like that, and we think, oh God. And so at one time I turned to him and I said, Dad, you're not being fair. And I gave him this whole list like kids do now, the litany of what he didn't do for me or whatever. And he was pacing back and forth, pacing back and forth. And suddenly he looked at me and he said, buddy, I said, I know you did the best you could. You gave me everything you could. You tried as hard as you could, but, and he looked at me and he said, buddy, you're wrong. I gave you what I wanted to. I tried. He said, I helped you build a foundation. Now get out there and build your life.
Wow.
Wow.
That is really strong. I mean, you should write a book about your father. Sorry,
Yeah.
Debbie.
I think he's in every one of my books.
Wow.
I think he's in every one of my books because he did a lot of Spartan youth training on me, all that served me later.
But it is so amazing because I do have some arguments sometimes with my partner, and he comes with 2 girls, and I'm the stricter one. But I do, and he always says, you don't have to be so strict. And I said, yes, because I feel that they're searching for that. You don't have to be strict just because. You do it from your heart because you see something in them that they don't seem to be able to have access to. So when I am strict, I'm pushing them to something or directing to something that they would never do out of whatever, the modern devices, laziness, what others says. Anyway, and he just is a really wonderful carer and allower. But sometimes I say, just be strict, not just because you do it against them, but you do it for them. And I can really see that they sometimes come to me and they always smile if I'm strict. I mean, we do have our fights, but of course it takes a lot of effort. If you educate, and Debbie, you know it, if you educate, it takes effort. It's not just something that comes like this. And I see it today, it gets so wishy-washy, how we would say it sometimes in Germany. You have parents who are exhausted, of course, of the time. They're working, and then you have kids with modern devices and technology. So, and then they pay a lot of money for them. Kids don't learn really to earn their own money anymore. They just get everything, but it doesn't do anything for them. It doesn't help them. I know when I earned my money, first money, and I was 14, so it wasn't that late or early. And I remember that I was so proud on my money that I had earned before. But also my parents were strict at some points, and I was never regretting that they pushed me from behind or said, go out and go to England and go there for this year. How do you perceive it, Debbie? And perceive it when you listen to Carol?
My background, previous life, I was an educator, I was a teacher, and, bringing up my own children and working with other people's children, I realized how important boundaries are. Although you resist it when you're growing up yourself, that it does give you some security. There's a frame. You can go this far and then no more if the boundaries are consistent. And I don't think that exists much because, like Janine was saying, you have to be consistent and you have to keep going with that. And, it's easier just to cave in. We are all human, and, you've got to cut yourself a bit of slack as well. But there's also, it's a way of learning respect. Somebody, your parent who is an authority figure, not there to tell you everything that you have to do, but there are limits, and, you need to learn that this is as far as you can go, and respect and accept that. But it's for your own, I mean, we've all heard it, it's for your own good, and you don't like hearing it when you have other ideas, but
I think part of the thing, Deb, too, though, is that if we all are going to acknowledge that we're spiritual beings as well, that we have to also acknowledge sometimes that our children are left and led by different spirits from our own. Therefore, we have to be able to acknowledge the fact that they're getting messages too, that I agree about structure and boundary. I was absolutely a tyrant when my kids were young, but the only requirement I had was I had 2 things. I said, please don't be a drug addict. And please don't get married early. Or don't be a drunk. And they said certainly. And of course they did all those things. So, but the fact was that my real requirements with them, because I was a nurse, was please stay alive.
Mm-hmm.
Because I watched what happened to parents whose kids got sick. And so we really grew up, but we were lucky because we had an extended family. I had a mom and dad and sister, and all of us grew up sort of together. And I was only 17 when I had my daughter. So I either screamed because I was exhausted as a nurse or threatened them or whatever. Thank God they both grew up to be the kind of people I like. I have a son who has a ranch, and I swear there are geriatric cows on that ranch because he doesn't want to kill them. He just feeds them all the time. So we have a whole ranch full of cows. I never will have a steak from one of them. It'll have to be a stranger, trust me. Okay, he won't use toxins, he won't use anything, but we will never have a steak from Danny's cow. I have a daughter who opened a recovery center for addicts of all kinds, and she's got 65 two centers that help recovering addicts of any kind, especially if they don't have money, and no government money or anything, and it's working for her. So can I take credit for that? I don't think so, because it's very different from anything I would do. But they lived in a big world where they wake up and they can be themselves. They're authentic, and I may scream at them, I may do all kinds of things, but there's nothing anybody could tell me to make me love them less. You know, they just are whoever God wants them to be.
I would like, for the last remaining minutes, and it's a big part of your life, the healthcare and you being a nurse, and the nurse's story was one of your, the first book and a bestseller. And you're talking about behind the scenes stories, the secrets almost. What motivated and inspired you to write the book?
I think that when I went into it, I was so hurt because I was a kid. I was a single mom with 2 little kids, no profession. And at that time, you could only be a nurse or a teacher. And my grandmother was a nurse, as I said, and my father said, be worthy, So I decided I'd be a nurse. But the intimacy that nursing allows, the true caring for another human being, the boundaries that disappear when you can become adjunctive to someone else who's struggling to survive, and you know that you can do something that makes their life a little easier. As one, there's an intimacy and a love that I've only touched in relation to spirit, in relation to near-death experiences when I wound up wherever I was, and the voice of comfort spoke to me. And at that time, I felt like Carol, like the small I that I am, but also as part of the greater I. That was me too. And the I and the I am were together. And for that moment, however long it lasted, as the voice of comfort spoke to me, I knew everything was perfect. Someone else was watching the store, and I just had to do my part.
Why do you think the book became so popular? I mean, it was published, over a million, or you sold over a million copies, and it was, yes, the nurse's story. Why did the book become so popular?
I think they could feel my passion. I think they could feel my truth. And I think I acknowledged in there how afraid I was of death and that kind of caring. But I think it's everyone who bought the book at that time, remember it was 30 years ago or something, and it's as absolutely pertinent today to nurses or caregivers. I think that nursing doesn't impair your power position. If you learn it well, it's the same as you see it without advantage. The advantage is only that you can help another. it reminds us of our connection. And I think all of us are looking for somebody who'll be there to help us when we can't help ourselves, when we're that vulnerable. And I was that nurse, and I know other nurses like me. And the system gets in the way, the same as the system of marriage gets in the way of a love affair. You know, and the one thing that I wanted to say, the connection, is Mario knew that his writing was his purpose, and I knew that healing was my purpose. So I wrote to heal, and he helped me learn to write to heal. And in our learning, in him teaching me how to write, I helped heal him as well. And it all was a win-win, because just he knew it. He just knew it, and we trusted each other. And there was no this life only or man, woman. There was none of that. We were two beings trying to get through life together. And in that, we made each other better. We were never perfect.
You were so lucky. I mean, all that you're saying is now taught, you know, through very different and very expensive coaching programs and books and self-help books. That was not available at your time so much, you know, it was just starting a little bit. And you just had that. And I think also Debbie has that. What inspires also, I'm sure, our audience is the liveliness that you have. There is a very awake body when you talk about the relationship. There's a very tender heart, and there's a very open mind, and a generosity and allowance and a curiosity to learn. And this is what I see. And we just had an interview guest we both prepared for next time, and he talked about the tender heart and the awake body. And I love that so much, in the open mind. But I do think that these are the cornerstones. When I listen to you, I learn so much. And I feel there is so much more I need to learn, because this seems to be almost self-evident when you talk about it. And I also think that when you don't have that tender heart, that awake body, that open mind, that curiosity with each other and learning, that relationships become very shallow and very tired and very worn out and very security-based, very knowing. And you said it in the beginning so wonderfully about the wise man, but maybe also it's the same about the wise relationship. A wise relationship knows that they don't know anything. You're always on the path of learning from each other, and not knowing, not controlling, but just being with each other. And I love that when I listen.
There is something else that I want to say to you, for your audience, to Deb and everything else too, that I do feel that most of what I've learned has been spirit driven, but also because at this age we're prone to, I mean, I've had lung cancer. I mean, that was in 2001 or something. I had a couple of strokes. I had a grandson die of SID, sudden infant death. I've had a lot of what we call tragedies, which are tragedies and have to be acknowledged as such. 2 broken marriages. They were tough to get through, the breaking up of them and stuff like that. But I think each of these big, big tragedies, for me, has made me more. The stroke has made me more. I've had to learn patience. I have walked every day for at least a mile, when I never did that in my whole life, just to get back to where I forgot how easy it was when I used to take it for granted. I went 6 months after I had the stroke, I went over to Serbia to meet the family of my editor, who had a member of their family who was terribly handicapped. I knew nothing about it. All of us, and they're a wonderful family. I had an exquisite time. The relationship has lasted, and we talk twice a week, and it's wonderful. I went to Berlin, to Germany, with a doctor who I helped let him die. I gave him to death because he asked. And I didn't jump on his chest and try heroics, because that was his need. And he was the one who walked me back to life. So if we realize and can get rid of some of the fear and understand that everything is given to us to help us make us better, to help us learn something. And if we can, fear stops healing. We have to try to get over the fear. And what I try to do is put myself out there, because if I know, like if there's somebody can run a 1 minute mile or a 3 minute mile or whatever, then any of us can do it. I think all of us have gifts, and those gifts are the way we see things, the way we feel things. When I had the stroke is when I stopped using 8-syllable words and when I had to come from my heart, because I couldn't remember the words anymore. So what I had to do is know how it felt and trust that feeling, you know. Not when I asked an angel one time, will I ever recover? And she said, recover as in go backward? I said, no. Will I ever be as sharp as I was? And she said, oh, no. No. We would not want that. And so I said, well, how am I going to tour? How am I going to talk if I don't have a brain? She said, why, Carol, many people speak from heart.
Wow. Wow, I really do. I mean, we have to finish because time is just running out. The time was flying just by. I just, it's unbelievable that this was more than an hour already. And I almost feel that Debbie would say the same. We definitely have to have you again. This is not just, see here, these are all my questions, all my posts, everything. And I have so many things, and my brain was just jumping from one. I said, oh shit, I cannot do this. So we have to catch up again.
Hey, while I'm here, I'm yours. And hey, just anybody who wants to know anything can go to my website, caroljino.com, can go to yours, whatever. I have
Facebook,
all my stuff
to YouTube, you're all, and you just know that stuff. I mean, my mom is already quick, and I'm so proud of her. But my mom also became quick after my stepdad went, and she saw how it is when my stepdad really never tried. He had Alzheimer coming 10 years ago, but he didn't, he just fell back and said, okay, my wife is now caring of me. And my mother saw that, and she said, I'm never going to end up like this. So she got really strong, and she wants to learn social media and everything. But boy, you just top everything. You're just quicker than most of my generation. You just know it all. You just press here and there. And I'm just so amazed. We're 70 years young.
Yeah. And it's also perfect. You're a perfect example that you cannot control what happens to you in life. Life happens to you sometimes, but you always do have a choice how you react to it, how you respond to it, and how you decide, you're going to deal with it. And, there's I'm going to be positive, I'm going to fight for this, things are going to get better, or that's it now, my life's over. And, you're shining.
That gets boring. You can, even if you climb into bed and hide for a week or so, it gets boring. There's a lot to be done.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for saying that, Debbie. You said that so beautifully. And I see that experiences just go through you. I mean, you have strokes and lung cancer, and it is horrible, but and this is what I learned, and I had to learn much longer than you, because I was really devastated. I was holding on to it and making a drama out of it. But this is what and no, you don't
it was a drama. It was a drama. In this life, what you went through was hard. It wasn't only drama. It was real. It was human, real, and hard.
Yes, I get you. And I think this is also what you learned, Debbie. And if you want to, be in this life on top of it, you go through experience. I always think I'm a joy finder. I always, no matter what, come back to my source, and that's joy. And it doesn't stay in our faces. And we said the soul has no wrinkles. That's something that Debbie and like you said, and I love that so much. I want to say it again. The soul has no wrinkles. And I totally believe, especially for women, if you can forgive and let experience be experience without taking them personal, there are less wrinkles in your face than there would be there. And I can see sometimes women get bitter, and divorce, I know it's a big thing, left for another woman is a big thing, but just let those experiences go again, because they will stay right in your face. And the face gets bitter and gets wrinkled, and the soul has shadows that it normally doesn't have. So you, to me, are an example of how experiences come and go in your life. You let them run through, you find them hard, but then when they're over, they're done. And then you just open your arms again generously and vividly and joyfully back to life again. And that's something I'm very happy that we picked you. And I'm sure that Debbie has something to say to complete this wonderful talk?
Well, I think that just something that's occurred to me, because, you know, through your own experience now and through your experiences as a nurse, where you have seen illness or some accident has dramatically changed the course of somebody's life and left them with circumstances that they never thought they'd have to face and a life that they don't really want. How would you help people to, you know, see that there is a future, different future, but a future, you know, and that happens to people every day. I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be a big catastrophe, because people have got different resiliences, but you know, something happens that changes your life. What advice would you give to people to move forward?
You know, it's a funny thing about giving advice. It really matters how I treat someone more than if they can see themselves in my eyes the way I see them. And if I can see their value. There is this woman who I told you, Janine, about the handicapped member of the family in Serbia. Yes. The woman was 3 years old when they gave her penicillin. She had a reaction. She's vegetative. She was vegetative the whole time. Her mother took care of her, and her sister took care of her, and her nephew took care of her for 50 years. She just died 2 weeks ago. Okay? And when I tell you that family is completely lost, she brought something with her. It doesn't look, she didn't do anything for them. She caused them a lot of work. She was a full-time job. But they loved her with all their heart, and they miss her so terribly. They still go down to the cemetery. And I think what we have to do, first of all, is stop labeling things. We have to understand that a body has limitations, but a soul and consciousness, there is no limit to that. That, you know, destiny, neuroplasticity can't outrun destiny, like they told me. So you do the best you can, and you know, you make them feel valuable. And if you can make them feel valuable, they'll incorporate some of that themselves. And then the rest of it is really your spirit and their spirit in the dance. You know?
It is so true, and thank you for saying that, Debbie, and thank you for that. We took that turn, and I would have already closed the talk show, but it was a very important question. I did see the most love with my wonderful auntie in California, who loves all the talk shows that I'm doing. Thank you, auntie. And she's going to be very curious to see you. But what I did see and learn from her, when her husband was, you know, having a serious illness, that's when I saw the most love between them. The same with my mother and my stepdad. When he was very ill, the first time I could really see the love between them. And there were some heart-warming moments that stay with me, and they didn't come in all what society tells you, what marketing tells you, Hollywood tells you, how you're having a great relationship. They didn't have, you know, the body was aging, the dress code just completely lost its attractiveness. And everything that you think is making good relationship just was falling apart, and then the good relationship could happen. And I really, really believe that what you say, I think then the spirit and the soul has room to expand, because every kind of expectation and what we are in a human package is then just melting away. And we think it's drama, but sometimes it's not the drama, it's the gift that brings the love.